Welcome back to Engine Killer. My name is Hank, and on this episode, I'm actually going to revisit my wall build project from beginning to end. Now, it's not just going to be one video right after the other. I've actually taken this opportunity to go back and make some changes to some of the issues that I had with some of the earlier videos and make a few other minor edits here and there, like adding music and shortening up a few bits, things like that. I've also taken this opportunity to add some more VFX to the end sequence. I think you'll really enjoy it. Cheers! I started out by planning the project with some rough sketches of how I envisioned the end piece looking. Obviously, walls that fit the dimensions, 10 inches long by 4 inches wide. So what I did was I measured out and marked 10 inch by 4 inch bases that I would then cut out of high density particle board using a table saw, plus the 8 inch by 4 inch gate piece. With all the bases cut, I then lined them up on my table to make sure everything was matching up correctly. I also cut bases for 2 destroyed wall sections. I then measured and cut out the foam pieces for the core of the wall structure using a hot wire foam cutter and lined them up atop the bases. I ended up having to cut out another long strip and then cut those to fit the ends of my walls for each of the 4 wall pieces. Next, I went back to the foam cutter and cut out the buttresses that would go along the front sides of the walls. I didn't actually measure the wall buttresses. I just kind of distributed them evenly along the walls, 2 for the gate and then 2 for each other one, and then I had several extras and I considered adding some to the back as well. Griblies. Whole box full of Griblies. I also set up some extra manufactorum bits to fill out the bases and break up the negative space. So next it was on to texturing. So I rolled up a sheet of cooking foil and then I just got to work rolling out texture on all the different wall pieces, really just to kind of give it that weathered concrete look. I also went outside and found a nice busted up brick in the backyard, which I then used to add some deeper cracks and battle damage here and there. At this point, I realized I should maybe put the camera in a more stable position so it doesn't come crashing down when I'm texturing my walls. I spent the next hour or so rolling in texture with my foil and just kind of smacking the walls here and there in random spots with the brick, really just to make the concrete look more weathered, kind of beaten. It's a little bit of a tedious process, just, standing there rolling out foil on all the foam, but ultimately I think it was definitely worth it. I think it really helps kind of sell the overall look and feel that I was going for. Yeah, I really like the way it came out. Some of the walls have these gaps kind of here and there where they maybe don't quite line up exactly right. For the most part, I tried to make sure that everything fit together as smoothly as possible, but in the end, some of them ended up being not exactly. There's a little bit of gaps here and there, but once it's on the table, I mean, it looks great. You can really can't tell unless you're really looking for it. So you can see here, I actually went through the process of texturing all of those little buttress pieces, even though I didn't actually end up using any on the back sides of the walls. I did, however, end up using those pieces for the destroyed wall sections. So they ended up working out pretty much perfectly because I had exactly the amount that I needed for all of the front sections and then the 2 destroyed wall sections that I had started making. After I finished texturing all the walls and buttresses, I realized I still needed wall pieces for the destroyed sections. So I went back to the foam cutter, fired it up, and started sliding foam through. These pieces are much smaller than the other walls, as I really only need the ends that go on either side. These pieces need to be sort of jagged and ruined, So I got out my handheld hot wire foam cutter and just, set about cutting away from what ultimately will end up being the insides of the pillars. The cuts here don't really need to be that precise, just sort of a rough cutaway so I can kind of see the direction I'm heading in. Once I had those end pieces cut out, I started gluing all my wall pieces into place. Just making sure that everything fits nicely. Edges are lined up along the base, and wall segments are lined up with each other. With the base of the walls glued into place, it was time to start working on the battlements. For this, I knew I was going to use the Civitas kits, mainly the small wall sections and flat rooftops. I figured the easiest way to get the battlements started would be to use plasticard for a base, just to kind of glue all the roof tiles to. So I started by measuring out 10-inch sections, but I only made them as wide as my ruler, which is not quite as wide as my walls. It doesn't really need to be, since I'm going to be gluing the Civitas bits on top of it, and then that on top of the walls. Basically, the idea here is to just take the plastic card strips that I'd cut out, and then along the edges of those, I'm going to glue the Civitas wall bits. Once those are dry, then I can just glue the plastic card right on top of the foam for the wall itself. So I knew I already had enough of the Civitas rooftop pieces to cover the entirety of my walls, but I wasn't entirely sure how many of which pieces I had, or if I was going to do some kind of specific layout for each one. So what I did was I got out some that were already kind of cut and ready to go, and I kind of started just laying them out on top of the one piece that I already had there on the end to kind of see what kind of layout might look good, if I wanted to use any of the pieces with the rooftop details on them or not. Because initially I hadn't planned on it, but then I was like, well, if I don't use those sides, I'm going to have to shave that down so that it fits nicely on top of the plastic card. So maybe I should just use some of those, and then that way I don't have to go through that whole process. And it actually will also add some detail to the top of the wall. I'm really loving how this is coming out. I'm also really excited to get the destroyed wall pieces done. Well, I mean, the whole thing really, but it's nice to see kind of the direction that it's going at this point, with the ability to destroy whole sections of the wall, right? I feel like that's going to be a lot of fun. My Civitas bits had mostly already been clipped from the sprues and sorted into a craft box, but I still needed to clean off the edges where they'd been clipped. I also sorted out the pieces so that each wall would have the same sort of details as the one next to it. So at this point I already had the kind of layout that I wanted figured out, and now I was just making sure that I had enough for each piece, which I did. I ended up having exactly enough to do the same sort of layout for the tops of every single wall. However, one of the things that I had forgotten about was that some of the rooftop pieces have these little hatches, so I ended up having to clean those off so that I could so that the plastic would glue flush to the plastic card. But that was pretty easy. A lot easier than it would have been clipping off the rooftop details on the other sides. can see here, one of the plasticard strips has a bit of a jagged edge on the end of it. I think what happened there was I'd accidentally glued the wrong piece on and didn't realize that until later, and then ended up having to break that piece off. Luckily, there was still enough for me to glue the bits that I really needed on there. So ultimately, the rooftop bits ended up being, they just kind of overshooting the length of the plasticard by, I don't know, maybe like 1/4 of an inch. So to fix that, what I did was I just took my ruler and used my razor to kind of score the bottom of the rooftop bits. And then I could pretty easily just break those pieces off. Piece with the broken plasticard edge, I ended up just taking one of the pieces that I'd already cut off of the end of another rooftop bit, putting that on, just kind of using that to measure where to cut for the 2 rooftop pieces that I needed for that one that was broken. I'm really happy with it. So at this point, I'm just gluing on a couple of pieces of foam that I'd cut out for the pillars that go on either side of the gate. The rest of the wall pieces lined up here are not glued yet. And here I'm just going through the Imperialis Manufactorum terrain bits, just kind of sorting through all the different pipes, machinery, that kind of thing. Most of this stuff I'll end up using on the back side of the walls. There are a few things like the little ammo crates that I will end up putting on the top of the walls. You can see here I found something I think might look good on a destroyed wall section. I did get to a point where I ran out of the pieces I planned on using for the battlements. Luckily though, my good friend and fellow Legions Imperialis player, Ed, had given me a full box of Civitas screws, specifically because he knew I was working on this project. And that was pretty cool, thanks Ed. But that just means more clipping screws. However, I don't really need to clip the entire sprue at this point since I'm just getting the handful of wall pieces that I'm missing. About adding some other kind of details to the front of the walls, but I didn't want to just use more Civitas bits. Then I remembered I had a box full of very old Cities of Death terrain bits from, I don't know, I think they probably came out around the mid-2000s, but I wasn't sure if I had enough to cover the entire front of each wall section. I did end up having enough pieces to do what I wanted, but I would have to cut the newel posts from the ends of some of those old wall bits. I also needed to cut some of the Civitas walls for the battlements because I got to the ends and found the last piece was about a 1/4 inch too long. So I swapped out the blade on my Dremel and set about trimming. For this process, basically what I did was I took one of my small C-clamps and I used that to just hold the plastic bit in place, and then took my Dremel to the edge of it and set about trimming. Now before I can add those bottom wall pieces, I need to clean off the excess glue that had dried in glops kind of along the bottom edges. In order to clean off the excess glue, I just used a nice razor that I had with a pretty long blade kind of sticking out that I was able to use to get into those areas. And it was pretty easy to pick off. Really all I had to do was just kind of cut along the edge, and then I was able to peel it off pretty easily. And with that gunk out of the way, now I can just glue those pieces into place. At this point in the build, the battlements are almost completely done. There's only maybe a couple of these little end pieces of the Civitas walls that go along the top edge that I still need to glue into place. But a couple of those they still needed a little bit of cleaning up. They were maybe a little bit too long. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here. I'm just finishing up those last couple pieces. It's time to glue the plasticard onto the tops of the buildings. I think at this point I already had the other ones down there on the far end already glued in place. I still had to do these ones. Now that I had a fresh memory card in my camera, I was able to get at least that little spot recorded. I did finally get around to making a gate. It's still a work in progress, and I think I might actually do something different later on. At this point, I have the battlements completely done. They're all glued on, except for the weapon mounts and the weapons themselves. The weapons I've already built. Basically what I did was I took some extra weapons that I had for Warlord Titans, and I just slightly modified those so that I could mount them on top of these little buildings that I'd added. one to each wall. And you'll notice, you can see here, there's a medium-sized building on the two inner walls, and then small-sized buildings on the two outer walls. My whole thought process on that was maybe they just get a little bit bigger as they get closer to the actual gate. For the weapon mounts, what I did was I took these extra bits from Dreadnought drop pods. Well, I guess they're actually for the Palisade drop pods, but that's what comes in the Dreadnought drop pod box for Legions Imperialis. Because you only need 2 of those Palisades if you want to use I forget what it's called, but there's a formation that you can use from the new book for Legions Imperialis, which is pretty great. And so I already have those 2, and so I had all these extra bits from the drop pod box. And when I put them in here, I was like, wow, these they fit perfectly. It looks like the gun would be mounted on something like this. So, and really all I had to do was drill out a little hole in the middle and then just kind of carve around the edge of the inside so that the piece that I use to mount it would just slot right in. And then the piece that I use to mount the guns is actually it's like a, I'm not entirely sure what this bit is. It looks like a wall lamp or something. I guess I can show it here on the side. I'd also found a piece of 1/2-inch thick foam that was already actually cut to the size that I needed for my gate. And here I'm just gluing some extra bits onto it. All the pipes and generators, things like that from the Manufactorum kit. I had actually gone through and put together some pipe sections on my breaks in the office at work. So I had already used up all the pieces that I had, and at this point all I could do is figure out, okay, which ones do I want to put on which walls, and then glue them into place. So yeah, this part ended up being probably the fastest and easiest because I'd already put all the pieces together at work, and now I just had to come home and glue them into place. I also ended up with a whole bunch of those little oil drums, so I thought, why not just put them all on one base in one spot and make a huge fuel dump? You can see here is that I've already cut the foam and glued it underneath the Civitas walls so that they have a little bit of a ledge underneath them. I think what happened there was either my camera had died or my memory card ran out of memory. I'm not sure which, but ultimately I didn't get footage of the process of cutting that foam before having glued it on. I went ahead and primed all the weapons black, and that's just using some regular primer from my local hardware store. And now I'm getting everything ready so I can coat everything in a layer of just plain white house paint. And hopefully it'll be enough that when I spray it with the gray primer from a rattle can, hopefully it won't damage the foam. But if it does end up damaging the foam, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. I think probably I can use some of that damage to my advantage, and maybe it'll look like wall has actually been kind of worn down in that area, or even look like battle damage of some kind. This was a pretty long and tedious process, brushing on all of the house paint by hand. So as I was brushing on the house paint, I noticed that I'd forgotten to texture some of the foam that I'd just put on there. So in the middle of it, I had to stop, get my little foil ball and add texture to that little bottom ledge there. And then it was back to painting. I also, at this point, I didn't bother painting the tops, like the rooftops, since that's all plastic and plasticard. I don't really think I'll have a problem with the primer going through that. And if it does, the foam underneath, it's not really going to damage. I mean, I really just need to make sure that all the wall facings are covered so that those parts don't get damaged when I do hit it with a spray can. Start off by spraying all of the walls with gray primer. And this is just gray Rust-Oleum primer. Got quite a bit to cover here. After priming all the walls, I've got a lot that I need to cover with black wash. Something like Nuln Oil, which I probably, in retrospect, should have just made myself. But I'd seen this product and I had wanted to try it out for a long time and never had. I figured this was probably the best time to do that. So I went ahead and I bought a whole can of the Army Painter dip. It didn't quite turn out like I was expecting. I think I was kind of expecting more of a wash, kind of like the washes that they sell in the smaller paint bottles, but it ended up being more of a varnish. Yeah, it was really interesting. It has a very strong odor and it's very hard to wash off your hands. This Army Painter varnish also takes a really long time to dry. I had to leave it out overnight. It's supposed to take 24 hours, but it seemed like when I checked it in the morning, like it was pretty much ready to go. But I still didn't end up having a chance to work on it until after work that evening. So as you can see here, I don't really have a designated area for painting miniatures at the moment. I used to have a nice desk set up in the back room, but we made some changes back there and I've since switched over to using this Monument Hobbies paint case. It holds about half of my paints, well, maybe a third of my paints, but it's nice because I can just kind of set it up, my paint station, pretty much wherever I want, or take it with me to the game store or to work. Now that the Army Painter dip is all completely dried, the next step is an all-over gray dry brush. I think this is just a Games Workshop or Citadel Administratum gray. And for this part, I use a pretty heavy dry brush. I painted on a pretty heavy layer of, I guess it's just like a sort of bone white or screaming skull. I can't remember the exact name for this paint. I think this is the Army Painter version of that. It's basically any kind of just sort of a really light bone or cream color will work. And at this point, I'm not really not being too careful. Just trying to make sure that all of the floor tiles along the rooftops are completely covered. Here you can see I'm just dry brushing some more of the Administratum Gray onto the gate that I built. Still not super happy with it. I've definitely decided that I'm going to build something else for the gate. I also wanted to include this part here where I'm dry brushing the sides, the pillars that go along the outsides of the gate, because I didn't really show a lot of the gate being worked on during the other build videos. So at least you can see it a little bit more here. You can see here that I added some small guns to the front. I think I need to make some little plasticard housings for those eventually. And I've also added some of the larger Civitas bits kind of upside down underneath the overhangs on the back side of the pillars. For the two walls closest to the gate, I had put these little, I guess there's some kind of like a vent that comes with the Manufactorum kit. They wanted to paint the inside of those to kind of look like they're kind of sort of glowing with a bright green. And then here I'm using the Army Painter Soft Tone. Really pretty generously just all over the top of the rooftops, and I'm just putting the paint directly onto it and then just kind of using my brush to work it into all the recesses. Once I feel like I've got pretty good coverage, I did go back in with a paper towel and kind of wipe away some of the broader areas. On this one, I actually ended up using a little bit too much, and I had to transfer some of that paint over to another wall. At this point, I decided to add some gold trim to the bits that I'd glued onto my gate. For the gold paint that I use are the Scale 75 Metallics. Here I'm painting some bolt gun metal onto the, I think this is the undercarriage of a Rhino tank that I've glued onto the front of my gate. And then I'm just adding some bolt gun metal to some of the piping on the back of the wall. Now here, I've already started adding some streaking and some grime coming down from with the piping. I'll go a bit more into this later on, but I actually use a few different colors for streaking on all of the walls, both on the backs and fronts of the walls. Actually, I had to wait for the washes to dry on the tops of the walls so that I could dry brush them. So while that was drying, I decided to go ahead and start adding some streaking and grime. For the streaks, I actually use a few different colors. I do some with Agrax Earthshade, and I do some others with Militarum Green and Argor Raid Shade. I think this one actually looks really cool. It's very different from most of the other shades and washes. I also sometimes will use a little bit of Corellia Green Shade as well. All the washes were dry on the tops of the walls. I went back in with a pretty heavy dry brush, using the exact same bone, that white color that I'd used before. Start off by dry brushing the tops of the walls with, let's see, what is this? It's Warpaint's Fanatic. Yeah, so this is an army painter paints. This color is called Bony Spikes, and I'd use a pretty heavy dry brush all over the top of the walls, not being very careful to go over all the air vents and things like that on top of the wall, because I'm just going to go ahead and paint over those later. I'm just going over all of the gold trim along the bottoms of the walls, and for this one I use scale color. These are my absolute favorite metallics right now, the scale colors. This one I believe is the Elven Gold. You can see I also have this little glass of water off to the side. It's more of like a little sauce dish or something like that, and that's because I had already been using it to add water slide transfers to the weapons that I'd already painted. But I'm not going to show that until later on towards the end of this video, and I'll probably just show adding water slide transfers to one. This color that I'm using here is actually a mix that I had made using the Army Painter's matte black air paint, and I had mixed that with some of their plate metal to get a sort of like a darker gunmetal, it's kind of like a darker sort of bolt gunmetal. That darker gunmetal on pretty much just anything that's on the rooftops, all of the like air vents and fans, things like that. Anything that looks like it should be metal, because then I'll go back over it later with a wash and a lighter color highlight, probably bolt gun and maybe a little bit of mithril. You can kind of see here and there on some of the walls where the primer had started to did go through the house paint and started to kind of eat away at some of the foam, but the damage is very minuscule. It's really slight, and I think it looks pretty cool. Games Workshop's, or Citadel's, Warp Lock bronze paint. I think back at some point it used to be called 10 bits, but it's basically the same color as that. It's just like a dark copper, like a really dark copper. And I use that on top of the roofs for some of the, I guess they look like sort of like ceiling windows, but I figured because it's a defensive wall, that should have some kind of metallic color instead. Now here you can see my gate. As I said before, I'm really not liking it, but I did want to at least finish painting it up. So you can see I've already done like the streaking and dry brushing and all of that, and I started on the gold, and then here I'm just adding some more highlights, building up highlights on the gold. For this I started off with Viking gold, and then I do a little bit of a dry brush with Elven gold, and then a highlight with Scales Citrine Alchemy. I really like this color. It's really bright, very, very light yellow. Well, light gold, I should say. I guess it's sort of like if you had mithril, but for gold. Yeah, for the little ammo crates on top of the walls, this is another Army Painter paint. It's this Venom Worm. Worm? I don't know really how you say that. Venom Worm. And here I'm just adding some more of the Elven gold to the pipework on the rooftop. I had all of the little details on tops of the walls and the gold trim on the front finished. I went back in over pretty much everything that I painted with the Army Painter's Dark Tone Wash. I pretty much use that on everything. Any sort of detail that kind of stands out. So here I'm using Citadel Colors Dorn Yellow just to kind of dry brush in some sort of glowing lights, make it look like some of the lights are on here and there. So I used some of the Mechanicum decals for pretty much all of the guns. I tried to use basically the same markings on each one. I'm not really going to get too into detail about the process, but you will see it all here. I do use both Microsol and Microset to adhere the decals. I've heard a couple other hobbyists and miniature painters on YouTube referring to water slide transfers as decals. I thought that was kind of strange because I'd always heard them called decals. So I looked into it, and it turns out decals is how it's pronounced both in the US and the UK. Decals is typically a Canadian pronunciation. But the people that I've been hearing say it they're not based in Canada, so I thought that was kind of weird, and I wanted to find out if that was a UK thing or something. But no, it's decals. I also, once I've got it on, because they're so small, it can be fairly difficult to get them right into the exact kind of place that I want. So sometimes, if it's not working with the brush, then I will sometimes also use my X-Acto knife to try to grab it and move it into place. You have to be really careful when doing that, especially not to tear the decal or scratch the paint. So here you can see I'm just wrapping everything up, gluing on the grill that goes on top of the vent, and putting the weapon on top of onto its mount. I need to take stock of all the bits that I want to use and see exactly what I have as far as styrofoam pieces that are already cut and plasticard bits that I want to use, other pieces from Games Workshop. I'd already had the two main wall pieces cut and glued to their bases, but I needed to make two smaller bases for the end pieces. Before I glue the end pieces on, I just want to make sure that the pieces all line up and have the right size and everything. Here I'm just going through my bag of offcuts and trying to find something else that I can use to put at the base of this destroyed wall section. Well, and really it's just going to be an end piece that'll go next to one of the other walls. You can see I'm getting close to running out of liquid nails here. At this point, I'm just taking chunks of smaller pieces of foam that I'd already cut, kind of gluing those here and there for the larger pieces of rubble. Ideally, I want it to be wide enough for the Warlord Titan to be able to walk through. And so this is where I encountered my first problem. One of the walls that I'd made already not wide enough for the Warlord to fit through. So I had to go ahead and mark that so that I could cut it. Perfect. Now the Warlord can fit through the destroyed wall section. I also need some bits that kind of look more like they were used for construction. Things that I can use that look kind of like metal bars and that sort of thing. The sprues are going to work perfect for that, I think. So here I'm just kind of going through trying to find all the sprues that I have that are that have a lot of squares on them, which a lot of the Legions Imperialis sprues do. So that's great. So I can use those and just clip off the ends and trim them down, and I think those will work great. I'm also making sure to save all of the offcuts that I get from that, because I can probably use a lot of those for rubble as well. Just going through and trimming all the sprues. Yeah, it took quite a while, and then I didn't really even end up using that much of the sprues. Well, at least not in this video. I have this really cool piece of terrain from Games Workshop. It's like basically just a pile of rubble from one of the 40k scale ruins. I really like this piece, and I think it'll look really good in between my wall pillars here. But I feel like it's just a little too high and needs to be kind of trimmed down. I initially started trying to do that with my razor blade. It didn't, that was just going to take way too long to do it that way. So in the end, I ended up just clamping it to my workbench outside and taking the Dremel to it, and that worked out pretty well and got it done pretty fast. Yeah, I'm really happy with the way that came out. Now it sits in there much closer to the base with a lower profile, easier for the Titans to walk over. And then now I'm just gluing some other large pieces of foam in there, kind of just all around it to make it look like the whole wall has just been reduced to these giant chunks of concrete. This really big plastic tube. And I definitely wanted to use that. So what I did was I went through and I put a small section on each of the pillars, just kind of so that it looked kind of like it was coming and going from the same place to and from, and then got destroyed there. And just kind of tried to make it look a little mangled on the edge that pokes out from the wall. And some of those I kind of melted the edges a little bit just to kind of help shape it. I've got like a little pile of cabling left over from Reaver Titans, from Reaver Titan weapons that were just never used. I'll add a bunch of those later on. I don't think I'll add any in this video, but eventually I'll get around to it. I've also got some other plastic bits over there from plasticard bits from Woodland Scenics. And those are just, I think for the most part, those are for like scale railroad models, I-beams and trusses. Just got back from the hardware store where I got a brand new tube of liquid nails, and now I'm going through and adding just large piles of aquarium gravel, which makes for really good, just really large chunks of rubble. Picking up where I left off, I start off by building out the battlements that'll go on top of the wall pillars that haven't been fully destroyed, and there's really only, I think, 3 or 4 of those. Basically, those are going to look pretty much exactly like the battlements that are on top of the intact wall sections, with the exception that the part that's hanging off the edge of the destroyed side of the pillar is going to be, well, just jagged and mangled. So for this, basically use the same process as on the previous walls. I just took the time to really take my clippers to the edge, cut up all the edges there and kind of mangle them. And then everything's glued on with liquid nails. So next up, my plan was to cut up a bunch of little pieces of plasticard, which I'm planning to use to just kind of scatter around the destroyed sections. Kind of look like just sheets of metal that have been kind of thrown about here and there. And since I was going to be cutting the plasticard anyway, I decided to go ahead and take this opportunity to create the weapon housings for the gate pillars that I had previously made. And so for this, I'm just taking a thin sheet of styrene that I've already cut, and then to cut that, what I do is just score it with the X-Acto blade. And then once I've got the score where I want it, I then go through and make several scores as needed on the longer piece. And then it's flimsy enough that you can just kind of bend it and it will snap, which is really nice because you get a pretty clean break. And then for these, I'm just going to glue them on with super glue and just kind of hold it in place for a little bit until I've kind of got it in the right position. The little overhang, and it's supported by a couple of little triangular shapes that I'd cut from the styrene. These were a little bit hard to get in place because my fingers are so big and the pieces themselves are so small. They're only about 1/4 of an inch. So I ended up just having to kind of hold it with my clippers just really gently. I didn't have any tweezers on hand, so it worked out pretty good though. I was able to get them into place and secured nice and even looking. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better than the way it did before with just the guns poking out. So here, now that I've got this long piece of styrene, I'm just going to go ahead and score it and in just a bunch of different angles and just break all those off. And once those are all ready, then I'll go ahead and glue them here and there all around the destroyed wall sections. Now, when I went to start gluing the styrene onto the destroyed wall piece, I realized I still needed to do some more texturing. So I got out my razor blade and just kind of started cutting away at the edges here and there, making some really big cracks, chips, things like that, making it look like it's just really torn up. And then there were also still some sides that were pretty bare, so I went ahead and got a piece of aluminum foil, rolled it up, and kind of added some of the cement texture that way as well. And then for the styrene bits, I'm just gonna go ahead and take regular white PVA glue. I use an old paintbrush and just kind of dab it on here and there where I want to set my little pieces of plasticard. And you'll notice I glued a few of them to the plastic up on top of the battlements. It wasn't until after that had dried and I went back and realized that the PVA glue doesn't really bond very well with plastic to plastic, so I ended up having to go ahead and take those off and then re-glue them with plastic cement. Once all my little plasticard bits were glued into place, once those were all dry, I went ahead and my plan was to go ahead and get some medium grit ballast, glue it in there, kind of in between all of the larger rocks. And same technique for the most part. I just kind of dab the white PVA glue here and there where I want the rocks to all kind of settle in, and then put it in a box and sprinkle all of the medium grit ballast in there. Once that's all done, just kind of turn it over, shake it off, brush off anything along the edges or that's kind of on top of rocks where it maybe shouldn't be, where it probably would have fallen off. But yeah, that's a pretty easy process. And putting it in the box helps because then I can just dump it all back in the bag, all the bits that didn't get glued on afterwards. also have this bag full of leftover cabling from weapons that didn't get used before. I think these are mostly from Reaver Titan weapons from Titanicus, maybe a few other Knight models as well. For those, I decided to go ahead and use, well, it just kind of depends on where I was gluing it. So like if I was going to glue it to plastic, I would use the plastic cement. If it's going to get glued somewhere else, then PVA glue will probably, something that's not going to melt the styrofoam. You can see near the top of the battlement, there's like just directly underneath it, there's like a large rectangular piece from a sprue. I put that there intentionally because I wanted to kind of make it look like there's like a big hallway up there. My plan was to basically take the foam cutter, the hot wire foam cutter, but use the large metal tip and just kind of melt away inside and use the sprue as a sort of guide to just kind of cut out that hallway. And I think it came out really nice. It looks really good. It looks like there's some kind of a hallway up there. Then I went back and glued in a few little pieces of plasticard just to kind of fill it out a little bit and make it look like maybe that was kind of really supposed to be there. Okay, so before I get started, the first thing I need to do is make some matte sealant. And for this, I'm just going to use 3 parts water and 1 part Mod Podge, and then mix that with about a drop of regular dish soap. The dish soap is just so it blends more nicely. And then I'm just going to pour it all into an empty spray bottle that I just bought. And then of course I need to label my spray bottle matte sealant. I also have this plastic tablecloth, which is perfect. So I can just set up everything on that and then spray it without having to worry about getting the matte sealant all over my workspace. Take too long for the sealant to dry and harden, and once that was all done, I just went about pretty much the same process I used on the other walls. I started off with the white house paint all over, really generously, just try to make sure to get all over everything and inside everything. The house paint was dry, I had set everything up outside on the back porch, and Just spray everything with a can of Rust-Oleum gray primer. For the next step, I went back to the Army Painter dip and just slathered that all over the entire model. Pretty much same thing that I did before on the other wall pieces. So after waiting for the varnish to dry for about 24 hours, I was able to bring everything inside and get started dry brushing. And for this, I'm start off with Citadel colored Basilicanum Gray. Now I use a pretty heavy dry brush on that, and then once that's done, I go back in with a lighter gray, the Ulthuan gray, all over pretty much everything, but not quite as heavy as the previous dry brush. Is done. So next up, what I want to do is go in and add some streaking like I did on the other walls, and I'm going to start off with the Chthonian camo shade. The next one, this is probably my favorite part, is the Targor Raid shade. I like that it's like a really kind of like a dirty sort of grayish purple. It just stands out really well, and it looks really good next to the Chthonian camo shade. I'm going to go back in with Army Painter's plate mill and just pick out a whole bunch of metal bits here and there. Not everything that looks like it should be metal, but quite a few things like a metal trim here and there, and little pipes, girders, things like that. Anything that kind of looks like it should be metal. I mean, I'm going to leave some of the metal bits for another step later on. Here I'm going to use warp lock bronze and go back in and pick out most of the a lot of the cabling and wires that are kind of hanging out, and then any other kind of little metal bits, really just to kind of break up the piece, because there's it's mostly gray and looks pretty flat at this point. So the warp lock bronze is really going to help to kind of break up the whole piece and add some depth to it. And I realized I kind of ran out of bits that look like they should be made out of metal, and so which is fine, because I can just go back in, and some of the bits that I picked out are just the pieces of aquarium gravel, and I mean it's all rubble really, so I think it works out and it looks really good. For those pieces of gold trim along the front, going back in with my scale Viking gold. Now once all the metallic bits are finished and dried, I'm going to go back in over pretty much everything that I've just painted with the metallic, any kind of metallic, whether it's the gold, bronze, or plate mail, and just hit all of those with Nuln Oil. However, since these parts of the walls they're going to be battle damaged and destroyed, I'm not going to bother to go back over any of those with any sort of highlights. I'm just going to kind of do it with the Nuln Oil and then leave them as is. And here what I'm going to do is go back in and dry brush with Chaos Black and just do scorch marks all over the place, especially along the edges where I want it to look like it's been burnt. And then just kind of here and there in the rubble to kind of pick out like piles of ash and whatnot. And then of course on the front, anywhere that looks like it should have any kind of battle damage. I'm going to go ahead and paint the rooftops with Army Painter's Bony Spikes. And on here, I'm just kind of trying to paint around all the debris that's been flung up onto the tops of the walls and the little metal hatches. And then once that's done, I'm going to do a pretty heavy wash with Seraphim Sepia. Not all over, but especially like heavier closer to the edges where it's been destroyed. Final step is just another dry brush on those rooftops with Bony Spikes. This was the last step. These walls are ready for the table. Yeah, so that's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.